We think women need to talk more openly about money because money really matters. It shouldn't be embarrassing or confusing. Join the conversation. We'll be discussing a whole range of topics which will help you get comfortable with your finances. Money Matters. Brought to you by AJ Bell.
Hello and welcome to a special New Year edition of the Money Matters podcast. I'm Laura Suter.
And I'm Danni Hewson, and we thought we'd make the most of the fresh start, the new year, because it can mentally help us sort out some really important things, particularly our finances. So we're going to share some top tips that we use and some of the things which we are constantly asked to share. Some of them might be really obvious, but we hope that they will at least be a bit helpful.
And because your goals are different at different stages of your life or different ages, so you might be thinking about saving for a rainy day fund or putting some money away for a wedding or preparing to have kids or even saving for your retirement. So we thought we'd get a good spread of ages. So to bring some youth to the table, we have Jenny Owen, who works behind the scenes on Money Matters at AJ Bell here. I'm going to give you a warning, even though she brings youth, she is very put together for her age.
Oh, what an intro, thank you. So this is going to be a shorter episode than normal, and even though our podcasts are very female focused, we hope that this particular episode will bring something for everybody. And I'm going to kick off with a really simple tip, and that is just to look at what you've got going out. And I tend to do this every January just because I have a lot of subscriptions renewing, and suddenly I find that I've got an email coming in about a subscription that I had no idea that I had. I hadn't used it. Maybe I'd signed up to that 3-month free. So it's prompted me to make a list of everything that I have going out of my bank account, have it all written down, and then figure out when those things renew. So that just then helps me make decisions about whether or not I am going to keep all my different streaming services or whether I'm going to get rid of some of them. And I have saved a huge amount of money that way. And last year I found I'd set up a website and couldn't really get to grips with it, decided I didn't need it. So I'd only used it for a month or so. And I had this £90 fee coming out of my account, which I wasn't expecting. And I did actually contact the website provider and they did refund me the money. But it's a really useful way just to go through and say, right, well, I've got 3 different streaming services. Do I really need to be paying that amount? And that money that I can save, what can I do with? Where can I put it? So I found that that is really quite handy. And I do know that if you're not wanting to do it yourself, and it can be quite complicated, then you can get new bank accounts like Monzo do one, where they will let you know when something's about to renew so that you can make a decision of whether you want to cancel it or not. But yes, I have discovered that I have things like Ordnance Survey that I've started to pay for. I only used it once.
Yep.
How about you? Any subscriptions that you think you may have to cancel, you've got to look out for?
Yeah, I've been toying with Disney Plus because we've already got Netflix and Amazon Prime, so Disney's one which I'm umming about. But what I've found in the past is that when I cancel a subscription, I try for the first couple of months to change, almost like set up a direct debit for the same amount to go into a savings account to see if I miss the money. So that's kind of something I'm going to be keen on going through. I've got this folder, like a life admin folder, which is just like, it's just filled with paper. So usually between Christmas and New Year, I'll go through that and see if there's anything that I need to change, and I'll have a clear out of that as well at the same time.
And I think you touched on a really good point there, Danni, is like, think about what you could use that money for. So this seems like a bit of a boring admin task, and sometimes it's a bit of a hassle finding your login details. And but if you think, okay, I could save £90 on that particular subscription, what can I spend that on? Now, obviously, the personal finance geek in me would say you can save it and put it away for the future. But it could be as simple as that's taken me 20 minutes to sort out, and I can reward myself with some new clothes in the sale, or a nice night out, or a night away. And I think if you think about it like that, then maybe it makes it a bit more fun. I don't know.
I know that Dan Coatsworth, who we work with here, he did something similar in January last year and put the money that he wasn't using on one of the streaming services, every month he would buy shares in different companies. So
that's a whole new level of financial geekery. I like that.
But he found that in the same way that you take the money out of your account as part of a subscription, he was paying a subscription to buy shares in the stock market. So there's all sorts you can do with it.
Yeah, and it's kind of, I think if you think of it as free money, because you would have been paying it out for something that you're maybe not using. It's also a good chance to check. Some of these have sneaky price increases, and where you were paying a few quid for something a few years ago, it might have gone up a lot, and you might think, actually, I don't use that much.
Yes, definitely. Those sneaky price increases. And the other thing is that occasionally within an app, you've added on an extra, which you haven't realised, but then suddenly that just becomes an additional monthly payment that you really don't need. You can keep the core app and just get rid of it. And it is complicated sometimes to unsubscribe from these things. You have to go through your emails, or sometimes you have to go through your subscription things on your Apple phone if you use Apple. So it is complicated, but it can be really worth it. But even if it's not the subscriptions thing, just knowing exactly what is going out every month is really useful.
So the thing that I am going to be doing this year is continuing with my pension organising, and before everyone falls asleep. It is actually quite important. So a few years ago, I consolidated my pensions. I'm someone, I don't know about you guys, I've had a few different jobs over the years, which means you end up with a few different pension pots. And a couple of years ago, I decided, right, I'm going to put all of these in one place. And I did all of it apart from one pesky one that is just so tricky to track down. But with you, Jen, talking about your big admin file, this time of year is quite a good time to do things where you need to dig into the paperwork. Basically, what I need to do is find a few pieces of paper and then carry on with my hunt for where that pension's gone. But it seems like something that day to day you just put off. But if you've got a bit of time over Christmas, you can hunt that out. And it's a good idea just to have all your pensions in one place. We've talked about on previous podcasts before, part of boosting your pension savings being knowing what you've got in the first place and how much you've got, where it's invested. And part of that is tracking down what you've actually got and putting it together. And I think with these things, if you break it down into smaller steps, so if I thought, okay, I'm going to overhaul all of my pension savings and consolidate everything, that feels a bit overwhelming, and let's be honest, I'm probably not going to get around to doing it. If I say, okay, I'm going to start by finding the paperwork and working out how I transfer that pension, that can be my first step. And then maybe I say, okay, in February, I'm going to look at where that particular pension is invested, or I'm going to look at how much I've got overall and work out if I'm paying enough in. I think if you break it down into smaller chunks, it can be a little bit easier maybe.
I had some success last year because I changed role and joined AJ Bell, and for me most of my pension is better staying where it is just because of the kind of scheme it was. So for some people you might find that, but there was one bit from when I'd first started working which I'd completely forgotten. I was only paid into it for a year, and I finally remembered who it had been with, and I tracked down the pension. And it had turned into £15,000, which is,
That's a pretty good payday for a bit of hunting around for paperwork.
Exactly. I mean, it's like 25, 30 years old. However, I then moved that into a SIP so that I could see what happened to it. And because it was money that I'd forgotten about, and because I have a pension already, which I've been paying into, and I knew how much that was, it's a pension that I can afford to take a bit more risk with. So I've quite enjoyed making decisions about where the money goes and thinking about ethical investing as well.
I know that I've spoken to so many of my friends who have moved jobs a few times in the last 5 or so years, and they know that there's a piece of paper in an envelope just crammed somewhere in a cupboard. And that feeling is like almost looming, like I know I should, and putting that off can, it's easy to put off, but at the same time, once you've done it with an eggnog, it's going to be...
Everything's easier with an eggnog in hand, isn't it?
Absolutely. And while we're talking about savings, something to remember is the tax year is just a few months away, so ISAs and LISAs are on the top of everyone's New Year's list. But remember, you can only save up to £20,000 only. You can save up to £20,000 in an ISA, tax-free. And if you're hoping to buy a house or a flat like me, then you can put a portion of that, up to £4,000, into a lifetime ISA. If you take money out of it, then you're going to get your government bonus taken away and then some. So I know Laura's probably going to be a little bit iffy about this, but because I don't have a very good cash savings cushion.
What?
No, I'm sorry. So that is something that I'm really going to be working on in 2022. So if you guys have got any great tips to how I can slowly build it up. I know that ideally you're looking for 2 or 3 months worth of salary, which is, quite ambitious really. I know that's ideal, but
so I think so what Jen's talking about is kind of a cash emergency pot, isn't it? It's that pot for like, if something goes wrong, all the things you don't want to think about. So like maybe you lose your job or something breaks or whatever. And I think loads of different figures are quoted around for this. I think the main thing is to look at your expenditure. So basically what you want to cover is your essentials if you had no income. So you just need to look at things like rent, your essential bills, maybe not your Disney Plus subscription, that could probably be cancelled. But your essentials, and then work out 2-3 months worth of that, so that you've got a little pot to tide you over. And I think if you put it, that will be a slightly smaller amount than maybe 2 or 3 months salary. And then that makes it feel a little bit more attainable. And then I think you can just work out how long you want to take to build that up. So maybe if you think you want to build it up by the end of next year, just divide that figure by 12 and see if that feels like a kind of affordable monthly amount to put aside. If it doesn't, then that's fine. You'll just acknowledge it'll take you a little bit longer to build up that pot.
It's hard to do though, because money just disappears from my bank account, particularly when I've got 2 teenage daughters, and if there is a spare bit of cash, then they want it. And we get so many deliveries through our door from fast fashion companies. It's unbelievable. It's really hard to do, and I had to make myself set up a standing order which goes out on payday every month. And it was the only way that I could find to actually start to amass some savings, because if it's in my account, it's gone.
I totally relate to that, because I'm really good at putting money, direct debits, first of the month, it goes straight into my ISA, my lifetime ISA, my pension. So I've got all that sorted, and then I can invest it how I want and figure that out. So I've got these long-term saving pots, but it's the cash which I have to get on top of it. I can just fit, that's the thing which is in the back of my brain, like I need to build this nice little cushion. So I'll have a look and see what's realistic, what's easily doable.
And always make sure as well that you have a bills account, so don't have any surprises. This is something I did when I was on maternity leave, because I never had to think about it really before. I had full salary coming in, my husband had his salary, we had separate accounts, and suddenly my wage had gone down a lot, particularly that 4-month mark. And after that I set up a bills account where at the beginning of the month when I get paid, I put the amount that I need for my bills in a separate account. My bills come out of there, and then I never have to worry about that. What I've got left in my account, I can spend within reason.
Or your daughters can spend.
Or my daughters can spend, yes. Because let's be honest, particularly right now, it was funny, I travelled down on the train today, and there were a number of conversations going on around me, and one of the guys was talking to his colleague and saying, do you know, I've just looked at my energy bill. My electricity costs have gone up by £300. And that is something which is happening to a lot of us. And normally, as part of my New Year refresh, I do take a look at where my energy supplier is, whether or not I've got a fixed deal, when that's going to expire, and then start shopping around to figure out where to put it. At the moment, it's just not an option. So I am trying instead to cut back on the amount of electricity and gas that I use. So I've turned the thermostat down a bit. Lots of shouts, "Mum, it's cold." And I've also done the thing where, do you leave your phone on charge all the time?
at night, and I know that's naughty.
Well, I tend to, because we've got so many different phones and laptops and tablets between us, that something always seems to be charging, and it can be charging and it's full, but it's still charging. So I have committed to trying to make sure that I unplug these things, or at least switch them off at the mains, so that I'm not using energy that I don't need to. And another bugbear of mine, and I'm going to admit something here, I always over the years have spoken about the fact that you should never let your car insurance auto-renew.
God, this is becoming like a personal finance confessions. You're wounding me all. You let it auto-renew, didn't you?
I did let it auto-renew.
Oh, guys.
This is a safe space, a safe space.
But it's easy to let something slip, and that is the one thing that I let slip last year. So when I make these photo calendars every year, would you believe on the photo calendar I've actually filled in one of the boxes, and it's been printed out by the photo calendar people, and it says car insurance, so I don't forget.
That's good dedication to remembering. I like that. You've redeemed it there, I think. But yeah, I think with all of those things, I mean, the energy bills thing is something that every household is going to be facing, because before the advice was just so easy. It was just switch around and you'll get a better deal, but those better deals don't exist. We've got the energy price cap is going to go up again in April. It'll be announced in February what it's going to go up by, but people need to be prepared for those higher bills again. And so I think where before you could switch around and maybe that was a little bit easier to save money, now you're right, Danni, it's kind of cracking down on actually how much energy you're using, and maybe just adopting my parents' mentality when I was growing up, which is if you're not wearing 6 jumpers, you can't complain about being cold and turn the thermostat up.
I was going to say, that reminds me of like my dad being like, you must wear slippers, like guests. Wear slippers, we're not putting the heating on too high. I rent at the moment, so although you can like change providers and stuff, things like getting certain meters installed and stuff can be really confusing and tricky to negotiate with your landlady. So I know that's, again, one of these things that's on my radar, and I know that we've kind of got to have this conversation, because ultimately it will benefit me and my boyfriend who are living in this house and paying the actual bills.
So my top thing that I'm going to be doing this year is using cashback sites more. So I did this, and I actually talked about this on our Money and Markets podcast a couple of years ago. Dan Coatsworth, the financial guru that he is, told me about them and said that they were great. And they're so good. They're essentially, you use them to when you're buying things online, and you just basically, you sign up and you click through using a link on that website, and then you just buy the item like you normally would. And you just get money for nothing. You get cash back on it. It varies depending on who you're buying through. But I had a look before we started recording this, and over the past couple of years I've made £300 on it. And that's literally money for nothing. And so I think it's now something I need to get more back into the habit of when you're buying something online, just think, okay, go through Top Cashback first, and you'll get, sometimes it's even only like £1 or £2 for something if you're buying low value items, but that's still £2 that you wouldn't have had. So I think it's quite good. It's particularly good if you know that you're going to be buying bigger items. So if you've got to buy new like appliances or those big purchases at any point, that's where you can really get your money back. But so I would advise you all to sign up, but then also remember to use it. That's the crucial part that I keep forgetting.
Yes, my nephew was supposed to be going on a holiday, a school thing, and he had to save up a huge amount of money. So one of the things that we did is we signed up so that we could give him money by whatever we bought, whether it was grocery shopping or anything like that. And he managed to amass quite a bit of cash. Not able to go, unfortunately, but he did manage to get quite a bit of cash together. I do use them sometimes. I often forget.
That's the thing, I feel like I need like a post-it note on my computer saying, remember to use Top Cashback.
But the other thing is, I don't know about your bank account, but the one thing I did last year is I took a look at the options that my bank account gave me, and one of the things was rewards for particularly spending on your electricity and gas bill. So whenever my electricity and gas payment goes out, I get some money, and then I can have it in points or whatever, or I get cash back. And I think I've made about £400 this year just by doing that.
And that is pretty good, because it doesn't take that long to set up, and it is just then free money that ticks away in the background.
It's like reward schemes when you go to, the hairdressers or something.
I
Worth
need
doing.
to jump on this top cashback. I mean, I've heard of it, but for some reason there's something which I don't trust it quite yet. Maybe I need to have a look into it a bit more.
So they've been around a while. I think the caveat is that you can't always rely on the cashback. Sometimes the link doesn't track perfectly, so you shouldn't buy something obviously just for the cashback if there's a great offer on, but it's worth using, and then even if 1 in 10 didn't work, you're still getting money back.
I think I've figured out something that could help with your habits for actually using it though. So when you have open your browser, you can kind of request in the settings that it opens another tab and it directs you straight to a website. So it might be that you go to buy something, you open up your web browser and already it's at the top and you can go, I'll go through that website.
She's smart. This is why we got her on.
Yeah.
Done it. I've made my mark.
I might have to get you to have a look at my laptop because I'm not entirely sure that I'm capable of doing
So okay, we can do it. Are there any other kind of good habits that you guys are planning to do in 2022? I know there's the classic, make your lunch instead of buying out when you're at work, which is great, but at the same time, saving money on coffee and things like that. It is the little things which add up if it's weekly.
So I think mine over the past few years has been when my phone comes up for renewal, questioning whether I actually need that new phone or whether I can, for a year or two, have a SIM-only contract that's much cheaper and keep hold of the phone. I'm not someone that's particularly bothered about having like the latest new tech and snazzy phone. And that actually you can save a lot of money by doing that. My task for this year is to convince my husband that it's a good idea because he does want the latest snazzy tech. So.
I managed to stop both myself and my kids from getting new phones this year, so our phone bill has come down quite considerably.
It's a big difference, isn't it?
Yeah, a huge difference. I used to do the take my lunch to work thing, but of course with so many of us working from home, that has become pretty much moot, hasn't it? And I've also found that I've been able to save on things like petrol. So some of the general savings that I would be looking to make aren't so obvious anymore. So it's got to be things in the home. So for me, it's just making sure that, when I'm buying that bottle of wine, I maybe don't.
Terrible.
That's not a tip I can advocate.
We do not endorse that.
Just buy a slightly cheaper bottle, maybe.
No, you swap it for a bottle of gin. Lasts longer.
Drink responsibly. Before we leave you to your festivities, we thought we'd touch on one more thing which is really important, because although these are brilliant tips, if you are struggling with debt, then this whole conversation might just have felt like a waste of time for you. But it doesn't mean that you can't cut back on the amount that you're spending. That's always useful. It doesn't mean as well that you can't save towards your pension, because if you can start at a younger age, then that is absolutely brilliant, and it shouldn't be an either or. Yes, absolutely, pay off your debt if you can. Look at where that debt is. Can you find a cheaper place for it? Can you maybe put it into a loan where you're working off the bulk at once? Or can you find a credit card which is on a lower interest rate? Can you be paying more? One of the things I found is, because I always do tend to have a bit of credit card debt after Christmas, because I
think a lot of people do.
Yeah, and you use it because you want the guarantee as well, the safety guarantees. And I would, when I was saving money on my subscriptions, I'd think, right, I'll just put that on my credit card. But then, of course, that would come off the minimum amount. So then the minimum amount was going out and it was less. So I wasn't actually paying any more. So you've also got to be careful when that amount goes out. So it's just a matter of really keeping track and getting advice. That is the key thing. There is so much help out there for people. You shouldn't suffer in silence. You can't let it affect your mental health. Talk about it, get to grips with it and deal with it.
So there's two methods that you can do with dealing with debt. One is called debt avalanche and one is called debt snowball. And I think if you give things fun names, maybe they sound a little bit more like you can tackle them. But the debt avalanche method is basically where you list out all of your debt, which can feel quite a daunting task to start with anyway. And then you make all the minimum payments on them if possible. And then where you've got extra money, you target the highest interest debt first. And so you're aiming to pay off that most costly debt first. The debt snowball method is where you list everything by how much debt you've got and you tackle the smallest amount first. So if you've got a smaller overdraft than you have on a credit card debt, you tackle that overdraft first. Now the financial logic says that overall you'll financially be better off if you do the avalanche method because you're tackling that really high cost debt early on. But if that means that you end up tackling a big wodge of debt and it just feels like a massive mountain that you're never going to reach the top of, then you can switch to the snowball method because that might motivate you. If you think, okay, I've managed to pay off one credit card in however long, and that's going to really motivate me to drive forward because I feel so much better now I've done that, and I'm now going to pay off the rest of my debt. You've just got to kind of think about what works, but making those minimum payments and working out what extra you can make and where that's best directed should be your first port of call. But like you say, Danni, there's so much help out there, helplines and charities, and I always think Citizens Advice is a good first port of call, and they can then direct you to specific debt charities if that's helpful.
And another thing that a lot of people that I've spoken to that have had big amounts of debt, while it is brilliant to see that debt start to be paid down, for them, also starting a healthy habit of being able to put £5 or £10 away in a savings account as that buffer and to see it grow is also mentally quite a good thing. It doesn't necessarily have to be an either or, although of course you would think that if you've got a particularly high interest rate, then tackling the debt is really important. But sometimes just to make you feel a bit better about yourselves, to have that savings, to give yourself a reward for paying off debt, mentally it can be half the battle.
I think, well, I haven't had a student loan, and the most debt that I've really had to deal with is credit card. So in a few years, hopefully when I get my first mortgage and buy a house, that'll be my first time dipping my toe into debt. So it's all really, really helpful for me personally. Thank you very much.
Because starting with debt when you're a student as well is, it kind of feel, well, I've already got all of that debt, what does it matter? But certain debt is different. So a mortgage is different to a really high interest credit card debt. So do think carefully about what you're spending, where, and how you view debt, because not all debt is bad with a capital B.
So that is all we've got time for in this special episode of the podcast. We'll have our normal scheduling will resume in New Year, but in the meantime you can find us on Instagram if you just search for AJ Bell Money Matters, or you can email us with any areas that you want us to cover, thoughts that you have or questions that you have for us. We are on moneymatters@ajbell.co.uk.
And thank you so much to our special guest, Jenny Owen.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
If you have any topics that you would like us to discuss in future episodes, we'd really love to hear from you. As I say, this is very much a conversation. Our next episode, we're going to be talking about divorce. So many people have been talking to us about divorce and how it impacts on their finances. But also we'd like to get into things like, if you're climbing a career ladder, how do you ask for a pay rise? If you are thinking about having a baby, you're pregnant, you're going off on maternity leave, or maybe you're coming back from maternity leave, what things do you need to think about? So as Laura says, do get in touch, join the conversation. We'd love to hear from you.
And in the new year, we're also going to be having a special webinar, so keep your eyes peeled for that. You can sign up to our newsletter where you'll get lots of details on that. And thanks for joining us. And where you listen to your podcast, if you can review and rate us, then that helps other people find us. So we'll see you in the new year.
Thank you.
Before you go, please remember this podcast is for educational purposes, and the views expressed don't necessarily reflect those of AJ Bell. The podcast isn't telling you whether certain investments are suitable or not. And don't forget that the value of investments can change, and you can lose money as well as make it. It's also important to remember that tax rules apply, and that the way an investment performed in the past may not be the same as how it behaves in the future. If you want help, go see a qualified financial advisor.